Well, hello, I'm RJ Curtis with CRS and welcome to CRS 360. This is our monthly webinar series. And what we're trying to do every month is bring you continuing education and conversation. And it's built on the CRS motto of growth through sharing. So it's June, we're halfway through 2025, and we thought we'd take a look at the state of the format. And as you see on the screen there, the question is, are we okay assessing country's year so far? I know Megan Maroney probably loves the title of this seminar. We have a great bunch of panelists today, radio, label, content specialist, and I'm really excited because every person on the session today is deeply involved with CRS. Chuck is a member of our board. Katie, Sarah, and Jimmy are going to be participating on the CRS Agenda Committee and helping to plan CRS 26. So guys, thank you for participating today. We don't do Q&A on these because we record these ahead of time, but I just wanted to share quickly everyone's contact information. They were gracious enough to let us share their email. So if you have any questions, this is how you reach our panel. We'll share that at the end of the conversation today. And our moderator today is Chuck Aly of Country Aircheck. So Chuck, I'm going to hand it to you. Thank you for moderating. Thank you guys for being on the session. And away we go.
Thank you, RJ. Appreciate that. We, as you saw, apologies to Megan Maroney. Our title is focused on where we're at for country music, and we have a great panel here. I'm not going to go long on introductions because everybody's got the internet at their fingertips, and you can dive in and go as deep as you want on that. But we've got Katie Dean, who's running Leo 33. We've got Jimmy Steele, a long-tenured radio vet and now a consultant with Collective Heads, and Sarah Frazier, the market manager at Odyssey Houston. And so we're going to start talking about some of the externals, just what the world around the country music business, country radio business is thinking about us, and what our panel is seeing as they're interacting and trying to win over listeners, audiences, fans. And I'm going to start with Jimmy with a really strong sort of out of format history in radio. And I'm curious, Jimmy, and I know you're still diving into this, but what does the country space look like to you right now?
For me, it's really exciting being sort of a novice in the country community. I always gravitate towards formats that are more than a format, that are very cultural. And I think today country's on top of that list. I would also include hip hop and probably alternative. Those are more than formats, they're lifestyles, and country is so vibrant. I'm probably a little biased. I live in Texas, so I've got a particular bent in the way I see things. But when I think about the new music that's coming out in the pipeline, and I'm trying not to be biased, but I think that country pipeline with country artists is just phenomenal. Artists that are on the verge of getting nutty big, like the Parker McCollums of the world. Behind them, there's Ty Myers, there's William Beckman, Vincent Mason. There's just I just found out about this young lady named Jamie Wyatt the other day. She has the voice of an angel. I'm just very excited about the music that is at center stage. I think for all of terrestrial radio, zooming out from country for a moment, I wish every format's pipeline was as rich in new artists as ours. So Chuck, to answer your question, I think for me, new artists are the lifeblood of the format. They're exciting. They're a great complement to the gold libraries, and they bring in new generations with them. So that's, I think, the main thing for me.
Very good. And speaking of Texas, Sarah, obviously a major market and a country, very strong country market. What's your perspective on where country's place is in the radio and music landscape?
Well, I would agree with a lot of what Jimmy said. I think as we in radio, we look at things, we're starting to look at things more in audiences instead of formats, right? Like, who are we targeting and what is the lifestyle? And to your point, Jimmy, country is definitely one of those. And we have sports here, we have Spanish here, Spanish pop, all very similar. And we ebb and flow because the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo is in Q1, basically owns the city, and everyone here, almost 8 million people, are country music fans during that time period, right? And then in Q2, they get a little tired of country and they go away and then they come back to us. So we really find this ebb and flow, and we're trying to create a happy medium. I also think it's really interesting what's happening with Texas country and how do we integrate that into the format. You know, and we have researched that and have really been thinking about how do we do that? How do we do that in a way that makes sense to the people that like new country without turning them off? Sonically, they're very different. We have a Texas country station on an HD that actually does really well, but it's a very niche audience. And then you've got, you know, the Zach Bryans and like I call them like the cool kid country, right? Like, and where does that all fit in? There's almost different formats within our format. And I think one thing that we're all thinking about is how do those all play together? And when we know somebody's as huge as a Zach Bryan, for instance, but it doesn't quite fit the sound, where does that person go? And I think that's what we're all trying to figure out right now, because we're curating a playlist essentially to try to get the biggest number of people, but that leaves out some artists that are really relevant. And I think that's a challenge that we're on the radio side really trying to figure out.
I'm sure. Real quick, just side note here, as I was thinking about being in Houston, we sort of have this moment right now where like we're putting the Western back in country a little bit, and whether it's Yellowstone or different things, and people wearing cowboy hats. You're in a city where everybody already wears a cowboy hat, or at least a lot of people do. Do you feel those cultural moments as much when you're already in a country heavy?
I definitely did when I was at the Beyonce concert. I do feel that way. I mean, you know, in Dallas, you never saw Western wear. But here you see it all the time. But I do think culturally, you know, when you go to a show, almost no matter what show it is, I was at a Tedeschi Trucks show a couple weeks ago, and everybody's in their cowboy boots and jean shorts. You know, it does transcend the lifestyle, and the look is definitely transcending genres, I would say. Here, I see that a lot.
Okay. So speaking of cowboy hats, Katie Dean, in addition to numerous other artists, is working with one of the top 10 airplay artists so far this year, Zach Top. And so obviously that's a great success story for the format and for your company. But even beyond that, what are you seeing from, you know, the airplay side, the consumption side, looking out and trying to build audiences for upstart artists and labels? What's your perspective?
I think, well, to kind of echo Sarah's point too, I think it's really interesting now that the Grammys are introducing a traditional country category. Like, I feel like that's also speaks volumes to one, how this genre has expanded, but how there's also almost micro genres within this overall country genre. And again, there's no doubt, obviously it's having a moment. Otherwise we wouldn't be being besieged by the coastal labels, who are very interested in being in our Nashville ethos at the moment. But you know, I think obviously in the case of Zach, it's interesting because sonically he obviously evokes a different sound than was very predominant on mainstream radio airwaves. And you know, in talking to people, I mean, it was really interesting how there were, and Zach himself would tell you this, that there were people that said to him, other labels that even said, like, we love what you're doing, we just don't know what to do with it. So I think this does all go back to whether you're on the artist side or the radio side or the label side, it's about finding the audience. And, you know, the impetus for signing him was that we love the music. I mean, he made the kind of music that made me fall in love with country as a format. And the real question was, we all felt very strongly that there was an audience for it. The unknown was, how big was that audience? And obviously he took off like a rocket. So the audience was bigger than I think a lot of people anticipated. And there was a craving for that. Obviously socials were an important part of his story. I think other artists, I've never, in all the years I've been doing this, I've never seen other artists rally around a new artist the way they did Zach, just from an appreciation of game, recognizing game, just for the pure musicianship of it all. Especially, I think, in a landscape right now that is, I want to say this delicately so as not to get myself in trouble, but where, you know, likes may not translate to artistry.
Right.
And that's not a judgment as much as it is just sort of an acknowledgement of what's happening in society, right? So I do think that it's a really interesting time too, where one of the things that sort of concerns me as somebody that's been in this business for a really long time is just sort of what that means for us breaking actual superstars that can have decades long careers, as opposed to this sort of everyone having the attention span of a gnat kind of situation, and what that means for all of us, honestly, for the health of our industry overall.
That's funny. That's my bonus question for the externals portion of the conversation. So let's go ahead and just jump there and talk about, are we training an audience, the relative ease with which you can find new music, be excited about a new artist, a Ty Myers or a Caitlin Butts or whatever, off of one song? Are we training a short attention span aesthetic into audiences? And are we inhibiting our ability to build lasting careers? And I wonder what you guys are seeing.
Well,
I'll just jump in.
Go ahead, Katie.
I was gonna say, our approach at Leo is that we are signing artists with the idea that we want them to have 30-year careers, right? We are not a label, and again, no judgment, but we are not a TikTok label. That's not what we are after. We are after the actual development of an artist, sort of doing it old school, in terms of like, you see something that you really believe in, and then you go find the champions. We believe in a champions mentality, right? So for instance, with Zach, we knew when we signed him that we needed the Sarah Fraziers of the world. And we felt like that if we went after a specific number of people that we felt like we're really going to get behind that was going to be sort of the launch pad for the rest of the country effectively. And that was a very specific strategy, as opposed to let's just throw music out and hope it catches somewhere, or let's go do an 8-month promo tour. We didn't do any of that. I mean, we basically had booked dates that we worked around, and we had identified who we felt like were really going to be the champions. And that was going to sort of start the story from there, and from the radio perspective. So I understand obviously people having a moment, but I kind of go back to one of the things that I feel like is sort of sad about the current state of the industry is, like, I think about Paul Russell and Lil Boo thing, right? Like, he has a viral moment and he gets signed to a deal, and then what?
Right.
And I think that's just sort of that sort of hit it and quit it mentality is really prevalent right now. And I'm just, as a fan of music and of artists, that is tough for me, and I just don't approach things that way, but I also understand why people do. I mean, again, in a society that sort of prides itself on a moment, and then nothing is necessarily going to last beyond 5 minutes,
Right.
that mentality. So
Sarah, how does that affect what you do inside a radio station in terms of wanting to be hyper aware of what people are talking about, but also not wanting to, maybe toss things aside and have to move on to something else?
Well, I would say that of all the genres, you find in country that people really do care. People like Katie really do care. It's not that people aren't doing that. I don't see it like I do see it with country music. Which means a lot, because you build a relationship with us, but you also build a relationship with our artists. There are people out there that saw Zach play the Bowl Cook-Off tent 2 years ago, and their minds are blown, and they still call in and say, I cannot believe that you guys, this is where we got to see him first. And that's where that relationship becomes so special, but you don't see that in other genres. It's cool. But then, also, we test the TikTok stuff. We do test it, and sometimes we'll play it, and we may play it and hit it and quit it, as Katie said, and then move on, because we want to be relevant, right? But we also want to take care of the people that have taken care of us. So we just try to merge that as best as we can.
So Jimmy, in the stations you work with, how do you encourage personalities to sort of strike that balance between, building up something long-term and being aware of the flash of the moment?
Great question. Just a little follow-up to what Sarah and I think Katie mentioned a bit ago. When I was PD of Power 106 in LA, this was many years ago, my marketing director, my morning guy, and myself got invited to a dinner with Prince, which I know sounds crazy, And we went to Beverly, if you know LA, we were in Beverly Glen, drove through the gates, etc., and had an amazing night with him at the time, his girlfriend Maytay, and his servants. And Prince was trying to reacquaint himself with radio. He'd been off radio for a while, and long story, fairly short, he asked me how he could get back on the radio. And Sarah, you reminded me of the story. And I said, the way I see it, there's two ways to get back on the radio. You either sound like everything that's out at the moment, but be a better version of that, or you put out something that's so obtuse and so left field that it just changes the whole game. And you've done that before with songs like When Doves Cry, and it just sounds like nothing else. So what you said earlier, Sarah, all these subgenres of country, whether it's red dirt or AAA, or regardless of what the edge is, I think it's a great problem to have. It's almost like country is its own CHR format where you want to pick the best of all of those subgenres and make that like a bouquet of the best music possible. And to your point, Chuck, you have to balance what's going to work in PPM, hit the center of that bell curve and not get too far to the right or the left. As far as personalities, I think that you have to have people on your station who are fans. Like you can't fake the funk, if you will. They have to love the music and hopefully live the lifestyle because people just want authenticity. We're living in a world right now where there's no such thing as a norm anymore. Like the world is in a weird place right now, and I think the values and the lifestyle, the whole country ecosystem is more important than ever. And if you have people who radiate that, I think a warmth and a sense of belonging comes with it, and again, expertise of the music. All of those things bundle up to make those curators really, really special because as we're all painfully aware, the DSPs can build playlists that, satiate all of your audience's needs, but it's those personalities who transcend that and in my mind are the secret sauce of, all of radio.
Very good. So last question, talking about the externals. We talked about the audience a little bit. Want to draw the circle in a little closer and ask about whether it's advertisers or sponsors or maybe even concert promoters out there. Katie, you were talking about people sort of looking at Zach and going, I don't know what to do with this. How sexy are we as a format, as a genre, in terms of interacting with those external partners that we need to work with throughout the country? And Katie, I'll let you start.
I mean, obviously, country is very much having a moment. I mean, we've seen this sort of happen where music is cyclical. All of us that have been doing this for a long time have sort of seen that genres come in and out of favor. So everyone is trying to capitalize on this moment that country is having. I mean, for even things like sync placements and obviously themed shows following Yellowstone, that kind of thing. So I feel like that there's certainly an appetite for that. And that's going to continue until it's sort of the audience need is satiated and then the next format comes into favor, honestly. But I think for right now, what an artist like Zach in particular, I think has shown in the same way that working with George Strait was that you can build generational fans in this format. I really do think that you can go to these shows and see the dad with their daughter or their son along with the grandfather, and that I think is something that is unique to this format. I mean, don't get me wrong, like I'll probably be the only 50-year-old woman in the pit at the beaches when they come, and I'll be happy to do it in the same way that I was in Paramore for the pit. I like the soccer mom out there just raging, but at the end of the day, like country is such a great community for that in terms of how encompassing it is. And I think that we have the ability to really grow artists up through generations. And that's where I think having those touch points and those relationships are really, really important. I mean, I can remember as a kid, we moved around a whole lot, but like my parents were obsessed with Chuck Boozer. We were in Charlotte at the time. Like we would go to remotes and having that kind of connection, with somebody that was a tastemaker. And I do think that that's one thing that radio still has the ability to be, is to have somebody be on the air and be talking about how much they love Zach Top, or, have you checked this guy out? Like that's a huge win for radio. And I think that's one of the unique attributes that they still have in terms of, again, proliferating into the audience on a wider level.
So Sarah, working with multiple formats, even within the cluster, has that moment country's having sort of trickle down to advertisers and sponsors and people you work with in the community? Do you get a sense that they're aware of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think for our group here, country is, one of the stations that if it is not doing well, then our group is not doing well, right? It's a very, very important property for us. But you will see in times like this, other stations jumping on the bandwagon. You'll see a lot of crossover stuff happening, and all of these crossover things happening have really diversified the listener base. You can get them a lot of different places, and they're actively going after that sexiness that country has right now. And so that's a challenge, because it's not that we can't go make the argument you can only get that audience here anymore, right? But the audience itself is a beautiful audience. It's a safe environment. There's not a lot of places where your advertising message is safe these days. There's a lot of places where it's not. And I'm talking more really about digital, because you never really know what that can, end up on. But also there's some formats that are divisive. And so, country is just not one of those. And so we do see it. Of course, in Houston, country is the general market. We talk about it like that, and it is viewed like that. But across the country, all of our country stations are seeing that as well. It's a really important format for us.
That's great. Jimmy, are you seeing, is that crossover thing that's sort of happening with some country music? Is that an indication to you of a moment we're having? Are you seeing that?
Sure. Last year, I wrapped up working 6 years programming the Mix in Chicago. And obviously we played all of those big crossover songs. And while I was happy to play them because they were big hits and they were magnets, whenever they came on my station, I felt like, okay, here's another 3-minute commercial for the country music format. So I was a little bit, torn between the good they were doing short term for me and potentially the not good they may be doing for me long term. But yeah, again, I think we have this amazing landscape of artists that are, classic country stars of the moment, and up and coming stars that I think clients and sponsors, want to be attached to that music discovery. There's so much excitement around new music. Who's next? I think it's very, very sponsorable and marketable in many ways that I don't know that we've tapped into quite yet as an industry that spells potential.
Very good. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about the sort of the internal dynamics as businesses that we're dealing with. And maybe even start with just not even specific to digital or DSPs or radio or platforms, but just the amount of noise that's out there, the number of platforms. Our audience is more fragmented than they've ever been, and how do we how do we navigate just the sheer number of platforms to the benefit of ourselves, and not just, it seems like a lot of what happens in the world is creating content that is given away to the benefit of someone in Silicon Valley, and maybe not to the benefit of all the work we're putting into it. But Sarah, how do you view navigating the different ways you're trying to pull audiences into primarily what you're doing with what you can monetize, which is broadcast?
Yeah, it's funny, because as you're talking, I'm thinking, yeah, it's what we went through the last 4 years, where when we created the Odyssey app, we're trying to get everywhere our listeners are, right, and reach them everywhere they want us to be. And so we created the app, and then we spent all of this time creating content on the app that was alternative content to our core products. And I think everyone in our company would probably agree, we spent too much time trying to create all of these niche things. And really, we've got to still focus on the core. The core is what the listener expects from us, and that's where most of our money comes from still. I mean, we are making that transition, but also it's where our listeners are. It's where most listeners are. 65% of all share of a year for advertising is through AM/FM radio, pure AM/FM radio still. Even though we don't think that way, us in the industry, we're a little cooler than the room, right? And so we assume everybody's doing all these other things, when in reality, people want the AM/FM radio to work, and they want their products there. And I think what I'm seeing for us is a return back to the core and focusing on, what's really, really important to us and those flagship stations like ours.
That's great. Jimmy, what are you seeing in terms of, the stations you work with in any format?
Well, I think drawing off my last experience in Chicago, we promoted our morning show as a live podcast, because I think radio still has an imaging problem. Oh, it's old school, it's traditional, it's this or it's that, but we still have an amazing amount of engaged listeners. And if you want a playlist and you don't want to lean in and you want wallpaper or whatever, fire it up. The DSPs are fantastic at that. But the stations that excel in personalities and the stations that excel in creating an environment that is a great home for this music and can represent it, and really illustrate that to the audience. Radio will always have sound core fundamental strengths, but it's up to the individual programmer and the companies that employ the programmers to let that vision really be optimized. And that's hard right now because budgets are tight and advertising at times is challenging. I just hope that the stuff that really makes terrestrial radio and makes country especially special to the audience, that as an industry, we don't kind of cut our nose to spite our faces, that old saying goes.
Right, right. So, Katie, I'm going to make an assumption here, but obviously, whatever you guys are doing around your artists, you're hoping to move the needles, and the primary needles, I would guess, are going to be consumption and maybe not as of interest to the label, but ticketing and all of that. So, how do you balance working with all of those platforms to move the needles that actually affect your bottom line and keep paychecks coming for your staff?
Our goal with any artist that we sign is like world domination, right? Like I want absolute saturation. I make a joke all the time that if I could create a scratch and sniff sticker, I would, because I want you to hear my artist, see my artist, feel my artist, smell my artist, taste my artist, right? That's the goal. Because
That
it is.
depends on the artist.
Yeah, exactly. But you're right. I mean, we're basically living on our phone. So it becomes, how do we get to the consumer? And it's that reach and repetition argument, right? It's the same thing where if it is, I mentioned being a big fan of a group called the Beaches earlier, and literally I was getting served sort of Instagram ads. And finally, and I mean, how many times has this happened where we bought that t-shirt that we've seen on there because it's just won't go away until we do it, And who knows what that is? It's maybe hearing something on the radio, or it's maybe that ad, or maybe it's that a friend took me to a show. I mean, ultimately for us, it is, how do we connect all those dots? Because it has to be, to me, superstars sell tickets, have hits, and stream. That's the goal. Like that's the all-encompassing package. And that's ultimately what we are trying to do every day, is to find the way to that. So we now are sort of inundated with any number of data points. And so we, as a small crew, and I'm sure we'll talk about this in a minute, but as a small, nimble crew, that's what we're doing, is that we are reacting to real-time information as it's coming in, whether that's streams, whether that's radio research, any of those number of things. And so what we're trying to do is basically manufacture that momentum on behalf of the artist so that we can get to a total saturation standpoint with the audience. And I will say this too, that I think we're in really interesting times now where so much of the gatekeeping is out the window, where the audience will tell you what they want to hear. And it's our job as stewards of the artist's careers to react to that information. And oftentimes it is different than what we thought it was going to be, And so I think that this is a really interesting time where we kind of all have to surrender our egos and say, the audience has spoken, and that's not what I thought they were going to say, but let's go, kind of thing.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because you think of like the old AIDA funnel, right? Awareness, interest, desire, action. And at the top is awareness. And it used to be that it was radio, right? And that was the only way. But I think for us in radio, we now realize that, yes, that's one way. And there are a lot of other ways too. And we are researching those. And when it's a whole marketing strategy, essentially, like the listeners are saying, we want this, then we've got to pay attention to that. We can't just do things the same way we've done them forever. So I think, to your point, Katie, I think that's really important for us all to pay attention, because there's a million different ways people can find an artist nowadays.
If we're not providing something that can't be gotten somewhere else, if we have no USP, that's on us as
Mhm.
broadcasters. That's on us because almost everything else is available everywhere. And if you don't have a USP in your personality or the way you execute your format, or to Katie's point earlier, if you're just reading off of lines on a sheet of call out research, tools are wonderful things, and call out's one of them. But all tools operate at the level of the people who are using them. And great research itself does not make a great radio station. Knowing what to do with great research and having the right people in the right places on your staff, bringing in what's happening on the street or what's happening in consumption, that's what truly, in my mind, builds resonant, long-term heritage brands. And I think as an industry, on occasion, we've gotten away from that, and we have that power. In my mind, digital disruption isn't our biggest enemy. We are.
Well, and great research. Every station doesn't have great research either. So I'm sure Katie will disagree with me, though.
Remember, I'm playing nice, Chuck.
Uh, so to the point about the shirt and the social media ad, and that I get bombarded, I buy the shirt and I'm like, dang it, I got sucked in again, right? But there has been this notion, and this is part of the reason I think for the Nielsen methodology change to 3 minutes, is the attribution issues around radio, real or imagined. Obviously, radio still moves audiences, radio advertising still moves audiences. But Sarah, so has the 3 minute rule made an impact yet? And if so, what is that?
Yes, it has made an impact. So just to recap, in the past, PPM methodology had to have 5 minutes in a quarter hour for it to count. So in this latest change that started in January, it's now 3 minutes. Okay, so that's better. What that's done is increased cumes, total listening anywhere between 18 and 25%. So when you think about the research that Nielsen gives us, half of all listening is under 5 minutes. That's why they made the change. So yes, we're getting higher cumes, we're getting higher AQH rating. It's great for impressions because we're all going to digital currency because we're fighting against digital. The problem with that is that how much does digital need to get that impression? 2 seconds on Meta. They have to do 30 seconds on YouTube and only show half the ad. TV is a minute. So it's anywhere between 2 seconds and 1 minute. And we're still hanging out here having to prove 3. So if half of our listening is under 5 minutes, and now we're getting credit for, minutes 1, 2, and 3, what if we got credit for just minute 1? I mean, where would we be then? I feel, well, I think it's a step in the right direction. It still makes me absolutely batshit crazy that we are not measured at the same level as everyone else. Pardon my language. I get fired up on this topic. But I'm just, why are we not? If that's what we're competing against, then measure us the same. And let's just compare apples to apples. I'm good with that.
There's a great article, and if anybody's interested, I'll send it to you later. But there's a great article sort of about the history of Netflix, and it's basically about how Netflix has killed Hollywood or whatever, right? So there's a bias there, but they talk about the history of, when the movie ends or the show ends, and you get up and go to the bathroom and forget to hit pause, right? When that next thing that it auto feeds you plays for 2 and 3 seconds, they count all of that and add all that up into the minutes that they charge advertisers for watching X amount of the next show or whatever. And they use that to prove, oh, well, this show's very successful, even though it was just everybody went to the refrigerator and forgot to hit pause, right?
Yeah, exactly. And like Jimmy said earlier, when oh, now I've totally lost my train of thought because I started thinking about outdoor, because I'm sitting here over this highway and all of these cars are driving past billboards and they're getting an impression and those people aren't even looking at it. So, okay, that's where I am with this topic. Oh, no, you said that we have an outdated problem and we have an outdated image and we also have outdated methodology. And so, I wish if all of that, I think that could really help us all.
Right.
I used to work for
Thank you.
MS.
For listening to my TED Talk.
If you got to cuss, now we can talk about call out research because I can cuss.
Here we go. It's
Just
on.
kidding.
I was just going to say, I used to work for MS, and Jeff Smullian is the CEO there. He's a brilliant man. He used to say that radio was the original social media. And again, another image problem. We have these connections, we have these audiences, and we deliver for sponsors, and we are an important part of people's lives. It makes you wonder, what part don't people understand?
That's right. That's right. So, all right. So, we touched on this a little bit earlier, and since we're in the cussing portion, I'll turn to Katie and talk about the competitive dynamics. And Jimmy talked about this too. Like the pipeline of artists in country music is so strong because like you said, the audience will pull in what they're interested in. At the same time, there's only so much bandwidth for the people at the various platforms. There's only so much bandwidth for the people who work internally at your company. And you, Katie, obviously focused roster, focused company. Everyone's not doing that. What are those dynamics going to do, or are they doing, as we try and build up this next generation of artists who will carry the banner forward?
I mean, I think one of our focal points is just to make sure that we serve what we sign. And I mean, that's just really important to be able to give that focused attention, because obviously we have artists that can sort of take off like a rocket, right? But for most artists, it's that old adage of a 10-year overnight success. And so it's a matter of kind of committing to that on the front end if you really believe in it, and going, look, we know that this may not be the immediate gratification that so many of us are accustomed to right now, but I think it's just, for us, it's very critical just to sort of try to find the path. I mean, it's like Sarah said, it used to be, it was, you go to radio, you get broken at radio, and then everything else follows. Now there's myriad ways that you can sort of have that moment, at least grab that first bit of traction. So then it becomes, how do you add to that traction? How do you elevate and amplify what's happening there? How do you find your way in that then you can sort of convert the casual fan that has just stumbled across you on either Instagram or by scanning through the radio dial to then want to be sort of engaged with you and find out more about you, and then go listen to the full album and not just the one song that's only been released, right? So I think there is an element there of being really mindful and intentional about the steps that you take, because the other thing is, let's be really honest, it's expensive. Trying to compete in a really crowded field, whether it's at radio or anywhere else, it can be really expensive and cost prohibitive too. So it's, I think, trying to find ways where you can have, and I love when people talk about, having a viral moment, because people try to engineer those every time, all the time, constantly. That's what the game is now, is trying to engineer the viral moment. And really at the genesis of it, a viral moment is viral. It happens because it has struck a nerve, right? So there's a lot of this sort of connecting to the emotion of it. And I think that's a huge part of it. I mean, I'm motivated by passion. Like, I want to get up and fight for something that I believe in every day. Otherwise, it's just selling widgets, and I'm not interested in that. And I think that's why the music business is sort of the crazy ride that it is, right? Because you get very attached to it because it evokes an emotion, and trying to find the way that you can connect that to people. And that's the challenge of all of this, but it's also the reason that we do what we do, or at least the reason that I do what I do, and why our team does what we do, because we believe in that and helping an artist realize their vision and get their sort of baby out in the world. So it does kind of go back to looking for the little crumbs, for lack of a better term, that then you build from there, right? And it's finding that one foot in the door through, again, maybe it's radio, maybe it's socials, maybe it's an opening slot on a tour where you're starting to see some engagement happen. I mean, it could be any number of things, but I think it's just being aware and knowing that 90% of this must be present to win. It's keep putting in the effort. You know what I mean? You keep putting in the effort until you find the thing that connects, and then you go from there and then build on it. That sounded like a really roundabout answer, but that's,
No, that makes perfect.
nobody has the blueprint. Otherwise we'd all be retired, right? So I kind of laugh that I think anybody that's really good almost has to have that Roomba mentality, where you're going, and then if you hit a wall, you redirect. and then you go until you hit another wall, and then you redirect, and then before you know it, the room's clean. There you go.
That's a great analogy. I love that. And you know, to your point about viral, I'd have this conversation because obviously I'm in the content business as well, and I'm always like, you can't plan viral. You want to do good content, you have to show up, do hard work, you have to hire talented people, you have to invest in the time and the energy and the money to do great work and do the best work you can every single day and get up again, do it tomorrow, and hopefully the rest takes care of itself. So. But Jimmy, I want to ask you, you know, does that and or should it be motivating to a radio station or a radio professional understanding that there's a level of focus or commitment around an artist more than another artist? Like, is that something radio should be thinking about or not?
Well, keying off a little bit of what Katie was saying and maybe what she was feeling as well is I always try to surround myself because I'm a big geek. I'm a fan. I love music. Back in the day, I had 10,000 CDs and 30,000 MP3s before streaming. Like, I try to surround myself with people who have that passion. Um, you cannot fake that. People can suss that out. Like life is too short, and we're all under too much pressure to be successful. That if you try to fake that, that's an ingredient that changes the taste of the whole broth, and you can't kind of navigate around it. So I always look for, when bringing staffs together or hiring people doing the right things at the right time for the right reasons. And we have a playing field. Sarah was talking about PPM. We have a playing field, and and there's a way to exploit it to our best interests, but it's not easy, because there are ways that you can perform better in there that come from just knowledge about the methodology and the way it works and the way it doesn't work, that's not related to the quality of your product. So you have to have people around you who know all the subtleties and all the nuances of all the things that decide whether we're good at what we do or not. So I think having passionate people who can identify music that can make a difference, and if a label is behind something, if there's belief there, I'll be honest, it impacts my opinion. If there's just a big budget and no belief, that does not impact my opinion. But I always gravitated towards people in the music community, regardless of what format I was in, because I've done CHR, I've done How They See, uh, oversaw all of Amos's stations in every format for many years. I gravitate towards the people at the labels that are really music geeks themselves, and are not selling widgets. I think Katie mentioned that earlier. Life's too short. So if I catch some fervor from someone, if I catch some real convincing commitment that this could be the next big thing, this could, and I hate to sound too overly serious, but this could make your life and your listeners' lives better. It's that high quality. You get my attention. So to answer your question, big promotional budget, nah, doesn't get my opinion. But when I see people break into a sweat and say this artist is this or that, or I mentioned Ty Myers earlier. When I started following him on Instagram, he would get 6 or 7 likes, and now he's getting like 40,000, and he's a kid. He's 17 years old. These things are exciting to me, and regardless of what platforms we're talking about or what formats, keeping music and the ecosystem healthy, whether it's country or the other formats for new music, that's what's paying all our bills. I think Katie, you mentioned that earlier about how you pay your staff, et cetera. Keeping committed, excited people um, in line with committed, excited artists. That's great for where Sarah sits. It's great for where Katie sits. It's great for where I sit. And while we are paid to hit the center of the bell curve with audiences, we constantly need to replenish that bell curve, because if in one book, Chuck, you have a 4 share, and the next book you have a 4 share, it doesn't mean nothing happened. It just means you gain listeners at the same rate you lost them. You're always experiencing some level of attrition. The goal is always to bring new people into the funnel as you're losing the other half. So I do think playing songs and constructing a library that's well researched, that has its place. But if you are not infusing that with the life of what's going on today and what people are talking about today, you can very easily be left behind.
So Sarah, for you, is trust part of the equation?
Well, I think, everything that Jimmy said was really interesting. And I was thinking, I think that when I think about our medium, I don't view us as being a music delivery medium. I view us as being an audience connection medium, right? We're connecting our audience with our community. And the best way that you connect is through building relationships. And so when you've got record labels that are really invested in working to build those relationships, they're building the relationships with us, but their artist is building the relationships with our community. And then if the record label continues that focus and tries to build a generational artist, then that artist continues to be successful. That relationship that they started maybe with us or whomever, then that grows as well. And it creates these longevity lines that you don't see in other formats. And there's nobody else that's talking about trying to create a generational artist. They're trying to create viral moments or have that one hit or get a TikTok song or whatever it is. But the discussion that we're having today that's so different is about how do we make artists have a long lifespan? How do we make radio stations, work best to serve our community? How, it's about doing the good thing and connecting with our community and having this wonderful environment that you just don't see that often anywhere else. So yeah, I think it matters.
Is
People
it
definitely matter.
do you think it's at all diminished from what it was 10 years ago? Is the sense of community fraying, or is it still there and healthy?
I think it's massive. Anytime that we do, we really try to focus on connecting with the community. Like right now we're doing a 10,000 for the Troops campaign where we are getting people to write a thank you note to somebody overseas. And so to do that, they have to write the thank you note, and then they have to mail it to us or bring it to us, right? But they've got to go out, buy a thank you note, write it, send it to us, or drop it off to us. That's a lot of hoops. Over the last couple of years, we've had 60,000, 70,000, 80,000 cards delivered to us in a 1 month time span. That's passion. I mean, it's hard to get. I mean, we're talking about Instagram. It takes 2 seconds to click like, on something. But to go through the hoops that you have to go through for a program like that, and every year I am blown away. We had a gal that is out in one of these neighboring communities, and she's been doing it since the one last year ended. She did 10,000 all by herself that she's bringing to the radio station. So, do I think that's dying? No, I think it's growing, especially where there's all of this fragmented stuff and you're not connecting with humans. But here we have a medium where you can connect with humans and you can connect with other people. And at the end of this, we'll have a little party and people at a car dealership, and people will come and bring their cars and hang out with us. You can't do that with anything else.
That's
it's
great.
It's still a very special place. And actually, the more it diversifies, the more special I think we become.
Jimmy, what are the challenges for keeping that sense of community within radio stations, as the financial forces and advertising difficulties you talked about, and just the way the business is changing? What are the challenges? How do you continue to prioritize community, not just within your local community, but community with the Katie Deans of the world and the artists and all of that stuff? Obviously, it's more challenging. What would you say to that?
Was that for me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, Jimmy.
Oh, sorry. It's a great question, Chuck. Everybody is responsible and has to answer to, cash flow and budgets, et cetera. And that's not lost on me. I think I mentioned earlier, though, and Sarah just did a great job of explaining it. If we cut that cable, that's the connection with the audience, we're doing ourselves and our entire business a tremendous disservice. And again, radio has a special sauce. We have people who believe in us. I mentioned this a little earlier. When I was in LA programming, the Southern California Broadcast Association, SCBA, did a study. Long story very short. It was called Virtual Neighborhood, and it basically just said that so many people are choice choked and time starved that great radio personalities have become substitutes for real friends. Back in the day, if you got home from work early, you'd lean on the fence and maybe have a beer, with a neighbor, or sit around in the yard and, talk about raising kids or whatever. But commutes have gotten longer, bosses expect more hours, and it's really cut into people's availability to socialize. And a lot of our personalities have filled that void. And again, you don't get that on you don't get that on a DSP. It is our USP. And if we forget that or continue to not prioritize that, then I don't care how good the music is, and I don't care who owns the radio station. There's only one end result. And when I sit with talent, especially morning shows, is what are you doing that's different? What are you doing that is really authentic? Are you talking about your wife and your kids? Are you sharing what is making your life on an everyday basis? Because doing bits and going for yucks, I would draw that analogy, Katie, to you working an artist you didn't believe in that is a flash in the pan, as opposed to building artists and building careers. And Sarah, going back to you, we are cultivating, hopefully, just like Coca-Cola did back in the old marketing days, we are cultivating lifelong relationships with people. We not just want them to turn on our stations and support these artists. We want them to have their kids listen. I've got two kids, both in their 20s now. I took them to see McCartney many years ago at Dodger Stadium, and they knew every word to every Beatles song. I didn't teach them that. It was in the ether, right? So those are the things in building community that I think transcends all of our competition. And I do think, and I hate to say this, but as an industry, we don't beat the drum about that as well as we should. And Sarah, you just did an awesome job, and I hope a lot of people get to hear your messaging.
Thank you.
Yeah, agree. And Katie, I'll close with you with same general topic, but what is it that you say to up and coming artists and or younger people on your staff about the important, obviously you live it out, whether you're at a major label like Universal, or at a small label. What is it you try and instill in people coming up about what this bigger country music community that goes from a fan driving by a billboard in Houston to to a radio programmer in Chicago or LA or Texas, all the way up to the community of artists and songwriters. How do you sort of bring people along into understanding what that means?
I mean, I think any kind of longevity is really based on the relationship and the quality of the relationship that you have, right? So it is, again, my former team at MCA would tell you that I must be present to win was something I said all the time, because it's true. And that's showing up in the little ways, and it's showing up in the big ways, and I think that this format is really unique in that a lot of the people that I started off with as, just coming out of an internship, not making enough money, where I had to, like save up for the one Papa John's pizza that I would eat for the entire week, going and stuffing packages in my mother's Talbot's pantsuits, because I was trying to look professional, like all those kind of things. Like those are still the people that are my best friends to this day. And I've even, I did some teaching at Appalachian State where I went to school. And, and it's one of those things where I said, look at the people that are in your class with you, because you may be sitting next to a Grammy award-winning producer. You may be sitting next to the next superstar. You may be sitting next to the next label head, and ultimately those relationships that you build and that you continue to put yourself in a position to build with other people, expand your circle. And ultimately, we all want an army of champions. We all want people to say our names in a room full of opportunities, right? And I still think that that's super, super important, and that you get favors from people, not from emails. So having an authentic connection with somebody, I mean, again, I've been really fortunate in that I don't think I've done a resume. I think, in fact, the first resume I did after I graduated college was to teach at Appalachian because they needed something on file. But I didn't have a resume because it was just that so-and-so thought I'd be good for this job. And it was truly that sort of community, back to what we've all discussed. And I mean, I just think that's so invaluable, especially these days when it does feel like so many interactions are surface or virtual or whatever, that being able to know that, if something went wrong tomorrow, there are people that I could call that would show up in the middle of the night. And they're people that I've met in this industry. I mean, that's a huge deal, and that's really special. So I think I have a lot more of an appreciation for that as I'm older. And that's something that I really try to impart on, the kids that are coming up too, that yes, it's a business. And sadly, I think, you know, as it's gotten a lot more corporate sort of across the board, you know, loyalty is not as highly prized as it once was, but that if you value the loyalty with the people in your circle and can grow that circle, then that means the other stuff just kind of takes care of itself.
That's great. And I'll just leave you with the person I was sitting next to at the recording industry classes at Middle Tennessee State University was Gator Harrison. So some people get Grammy winning producers. I got Gator.
You got Gator.
I got Gator. But hey, this has been great. You guys, this has really been wonderful. I appreciate all the input, and I'll kick it back to RJ.
Hey, thank you guys. This makes me so excited about what the agenda might look like for CRS 2026, because Katie and Sarah and Jimmy are all on our agenda committee. And of course, as I mentioned at the beginning here, Chuck is on our board of directors and contributes greatly there. So thank you guys for this discussion. If you have any questions for anybody on the panel today, this is how to reach them. And you can reach out to them directly. This is how to follow us on CRS socials. And thank you guys again. Thanks for tuning in, and appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you all.